Pickaxe Mountain. You've heard this name now. It's becoming a player in the narrative of this war. And this war has had lots of twists and turns and lots of different storylines. And we've been hearing the name Pickaxe Mountain a lot over the last couple of weeks. And in this video, we're going to break that whole thing down. We're going to talk about what Pickaxe Mountain is and why it hasn't been attacked until now, and why it's becoming important at this stage. And we're also going to get into what the Iranians are saying about the possibility of Pickaxe Mountain getting attacked. We're going to get into all of it. Stick around to the end of this video, because in the later part of the video, when we start talking about the strategic thinking on both sides, on the American side and on the Iranian side, it's going to get really interesting, because the information about what Pickaxe Mountain is, you could find in a lot of places. There's lots of articles written about it, but we're going to go much deeper in this video. Okay, so to get us started, let's start off with this clip of President Trump. He was asked about Pickaxe Mountain just the other day in the press gaggle in the Oval Office. Here we go. Well, not in the Oval Office, but in the White House.
Haley Bullis, Scripps News. Thank you for the question. Do you believe that Iran has moved nuclear centrifuges into Pickaxe Mountain? And when you say we're not done yet, what is left to finish?
Well, I think that they may have. We don't have it on record. All we do is read the fake news. You know, we see the news is so wrong so many times. So, you know, maybe this one they have right, but it's okay. It doesn't mean anything unless they have the material. You're talking about the centrifuges. Yeah, it doesn't mean anything unless they have the material. They don't have. We follow the material. That's where the action is, and we'll be hitting that area probably pretty soon. And there's not a thing they can do about it. You know, normally I wouldn't say that. If I thought they could do something about it, I would never say that. But we'll be hitting that area pretty soon, and very heavily.
Okay. Now this clip has a lot in it. Let me just break down what we heard. What we heard there was number one. She said, "Have they moved material in?" And he said, "Well, we just know it's in the media." Yeah, right. We just know it's been reported in the media. And also, you know, if it's just centrifuges but not the material, then it doesn't matter, because the material is where the action is. By the material, he means the uranium. Okay, we're going to get into all of that later. What has been moved into Pickaxe Mountain is a very interesting question. And then in the later part of that clip, at the end of that clip, he said, "We're going to hit it very soon. We're going to hit it very strongly very soon." And I'm saying that even though you usually don't, you know, telegraph what you're going to do in advance, there's not a thing they can do about it. So I'm saying it anyway. Okay, keep all this in mind. It's all going to come into play later on, because as much as it sounds like Trump is just, you know, rambling or shooting from the hip, there's actually a lot in what he just said there. Okay, we'll come back to it. Now, for the rest of this video, we're going to take a look at two articles. One of them is by Ron Ben Yishai, who is one of the top Israeli military correspondents. He's one of the best informed and best analysts when it comes to defense and military. He writes for Ynet, which is sort of a mainstream, maybe left-leaning mainstream media in Israel, but he doesn't really have a political axe to grind. He's really one of the top journalists when it comes to military and defense issues in Israel. So we're going to take a look at an article that he wrote extensively, all about Pickaxe Mountain. And then we're going to take a look at what Iranian state media is saying about the whole Pickaxe Mountain situation. So let's get to Ron Ben Yishai. You see the title of his piece here: "Why the U.S. and Israel Have Not Struck Iran's Pickaxe Mountain." Let's get right to it. The central concern for nuclear experts, as well as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and U.S. President Donald Trump, is that Iran could take the uranium it still holds, enriched to 60%, and raise it to weapons-grade levels using a relatively small number of surviving centrifuges. If Tehran does so, and there are indications that this is its intention, it could possess enough fissile material for more than one atomic bomb. Once weapons-grade material is available, the path to assembling a nuclear weapon becomes relatively short. So he opens the piece not by talking about Pickaxe, but by laying the predicate for the whole discussion, which is the big concern on the nuclear side of things is that we know that Iran has a stockpile of uranium enriched to 60%. And that means that if they can get some centrifuges working and they can get the uranium to where the centrifuges are working, they could actually have a nuclear bomb fairly quickly. But it's not just having a nuclear bomb, as we'll see. Highly enriched fissile material could also be used in a radiological or dirty bomb. A missile, warhead, or aerial bomb carrying such material could scatter radioactive contamination across a wide area when it strikes the ground, or even if it's intercepted, potentially making the area inaccessible, which means that even without getting to the point of an actual nuclear weapon that could create, a nuclear explosion, a dirty bomb using this material could be very devastating. Okay, so meaning the big concern is if the uranium gets to where the centrifuges are and the centrifuges can operate, that they could do something, they could really rush to some kind of dirty bomb or nuclear weapon, and then that changes everything. Okay, that's the concern. That is why the new network of underground tunnels and production halls Iran has spent years excavating beneath the site known as Pickaxe Mountain has become a focus for Israeli, American, and Western intelligence agencies. The facility lies about 1.5 kilometers south of the Natanz uranium enrichment and nuclear production complex. Excavation began in 2020, and the site soon drew intelligence and scientific attention because its intended purpose remained unclear. Iran may plan to turn the tunnel system into an enrichment facility and transfer advanced centrifuge arrays there from the original Natanz site to protect them. Alternatively, the complex could be intended for work related to assembling a nuclear weapon. There's still no definitive answer. Let's just sum this up very briefly. When they start excavating deep into this massive granite mountain, we're going to find out more about the geological nature of it. They start excavating into that. It's not because they're looking for a place to, store some school buses or, it obviously has some highly sensitive security purpose because it's very difficult to dig these underground tunnels into a mountain like that. So back in 2020, Western intelligence notices that Iran starts excavating digging tunnels underneath this mountain only 1.5 kilometers away from Natanz. And Natanz is a massive uranium enrichment and nuclear production complex. Okay, so right near Natanz, they're digging this underground facility. What do they want to do with it? But they're not sure what it was for. Is it a place are they going to make another uranium enrichment facility? Are they going to use that as the place where they're going to assemble a nuclear bomb, like once they do everything else everywhere else? Because the thing you want to protect the most is once you're assembling a bomb, because the Iranians know that the Israelis and the US have great intelligence. So if they're going to actually assemble a bomb, if they're going to get to that stage, and they were close, they had 60% enriched uranium, they need a facility where they can do it securely. Okay, maybe that's what they're doing. They didn't know. Okay, there's still no definitive answer. Geologically, Pickaxe Mountain is composed of igneous rock, primarily granite. According to a Wall Street Journal report published Tuesday, its tunnels lie between 100 and 135 meters underground. Hold on. Here we go. Just jumped on me. Making them almost completely resistant to conventional aerial bombardment. Both the depth and the hardness of the surrounding rock resemble the characteristics of Iran's Fordo enrichment plant. You might remember Fordo, you might remember that name. Both Natanz and Fordo were hit in Operation Midnight Hammer at the end of the 12-day war. At the end of Israel's Rising Lion operation last summer, that's the 12-day war, US B-2 bombers and specialized munitions were required to damage Fordo's underground facilities and bury uranium enriched to 60% that had been stored there. The name Pickaxe Mountain is itself a translation. Its Persian name, Kue Kolang, refers to a pickaxe or hoe, apparently reflecting the difficulty of excavating the mountain even in ancient times. Despite modern equipment and reported Chinese expertise, tunneling through it remains highly complicated. So you have this, it's a granite, igneous rock, granite mountain, very, very hard rock. And its tunnels are between 100 and 135 meters underground. Okay, so you can't just bombard them from the air. The underground facility was not attacked in June 2025 because it was empty or nearly empty, and its intended role had not been established. After Operation Rising Lion, I mean, you might say, well, why not destroy it anyway? We'll see soon why not. It's not such a simple matter. Okay, well, this will all become very clear as we keep reading. Okay, but just bear in mind, they start digging the facility in 2020. Even in June 2025, when Midnight Hammer's happening and the Americans are hitting Fordow and Natanz and Isfahan, these other nuclear facilities, this Pickaxe Mountain place is just basically empty tunnels. After Operation Rising Lion, however, Iran began moving centrifuges and other equipment from Natanz to the Pickaxe Mountain tunnels, along with machinery recovered from other nuclear sites that had been bombed. The transfers did not begin immediately. Iran first needed time to clear the entrances to damaged tunnels at Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan. Only several months later, in the fall of 2025, did it begin secretly transferring surviving or lightly damaged centrifuges to Pickaxe Mountain. Okay, now we're getting the plot. Back in June 2025, 12-day war, Pickaxe Mountain's an empty bunch of tunnels. It could be that it was originally meant for whatever, enrichment or assembling a bomb. We don't know. But after the Midnight Hammer attacks on the three main nuclear facilities, Natanz, Fordow, Isfahan, it then takes the Iranians a little while to excavate the entrances to those places so that they can get at what's inside. And inside, there's all this damaged equipment. So they just basically say, okay, take everything that we can salvage and get it over to Pickaxe and put it in the tunnels of Pickaxe where it will be safe. Okay? Meaning just maybe a junkyard or maybe a storage facility. They're moving the equipment, whatever could be salvaged, they're moving it into Pickaxe. Iran attempted to conceal the activity from satellite sensors and other intelligence systems operated by Israel and the United States, but apparently with limited success. Even so, the site was not attacked during Israel's Roaring Lion operation, that is, or the American Epic Fury campaign. That's the same operation. That's February 28th to April 7th. That's what we call the first stage of this war. So they didn't attack it then either. They had already been, let's follow the timeline. The Iranians had already been, we knew that they were moving stuff in there in late 2025, but we still didn't attack it. Okay, we still didn't attack it in the first stage of this war. Why not? Okay. One likely reason is that the facility was still not being used for actual nuclear activity, such as uranium enrichment or weapons design, and served only as a storage location. Another equally important reason is that seriously damaging the mountain's tunnels would require an exceptionally large operation that only the United States could carry out. Only the U.S. Air Force possesses the roughly 10-ton GBU-57 bunker-busting bomb, which can penetrate approximately 60 meters of hard rock. Now, remember, we mentioned that these tunnels are between 100 and 135 meters underground. The United States also operates the stealth B-2 bombers capable of carrying several of the weapons. During the June 2025 Midnight Hammer operation against Fordow and other underground nuclear facilities, the United States deployed 7 B-2 bombers carrying 14 highly precise bunker-busting bombs. Each weapon was dropped into the crater created by the bomb before it, allowing the strikes to reach an estimated depth of 80 to 100 meters. You follow this? Meaning they would drop a bomb, it wouldn't go down far enough, and then they would drop another one into that crater to keep penetrating deeper and deeper. The shocks created around Fordow damaged its highly sensitive centrifuge systems and rendered them unusable. The attack was one of the largest operations conducted by the U.S. Air Force since World War II. Seismic stations near Fordow recorded tremors equivalent to a magnitude 4.3 earthquake. The damage affected not only the rapidly spinning centrifuges, but also the carefully leveled foundations on which they stood. U.S. and Israeli intelligence agencies therefore concluded that Fordow had been taken out of service, even if it was not completely destroyed. Let's understand this now again. You might still be wondering, why didn't they attack it yet? Why didn't they attack it between February 28th and April 7th? when all that intense bombing and the Israelis and the Americans, epic fury, why didn't they attack Pickaxe Mountain yet? Well, think about it this way. It said here that they didn't attack it. His first one likely reason is that it was still not being used for actual nuclear activity. But you might be asking, well, so what? All the equipment is there. Understand. Put yourself into the shoes of the Americans and Israelis, and you're watching everything Iran is doing, and you see them getting all the damaged stuff out of these other sites. If you let on too early that you know what Pickaxe Mountain is, then you can't inflict maximum damage on your enemy. Meaning, if you see them moving all of this equipment from all these other sites and they're putting it all in Pickaxe Mountain, why bomb Pickaxe Mountain before they're done? If you bomb it before they're done, moving everything in, then maybe the main stuff that you really want, maybe the enriched uranium, maybe you don't know what else is going to go in there yet. And it's not yet a threat. They haven't repaired these damaged centrifuges. We don't know. The best thing to do, especially because it's such a complex operation, as we'll find out, is just watch and prepare plans for how you're going to deal with Pickaxe Mountain. You can already start preparing. But the best thing to do is just observe what they're doing. Okay. The bombers flew directly. Now it's talking about how Midnight Hammer ran, because in order to understand, like when we're watching the news today, and everyone's like that news clip of Trump, oh, we're going to attack Pickaxe Mountain. He's now going to go through what happened in Midnight Hammer so that we can understand what an operation against Pickaxe Mountain would have to look like. The bombers flew directly from a base in Missouri and returned there, spending more than 30 hours in the air. A separate deception operation sent 7 other advanced B-2 bombers toward Guam in the Pacific Ocean, apparently to make Iran believe the attack would come from that direction. No less important, however, was the effect on the American weapons stockpile. The operation, so we described the operation before, that they would drop one of these bunker buster bombs, it would go only so far, and then they would have to drop another one into the crater created by that one, etc., to get all the way down. So what was the effect on the Americans' weapons stockpile? The operation used 14 of the roughly 20 heavy bunker busting bombs the United States reportedly possessed. The Americans only had 20 of these things, and they used 14 in Midnight Hammer, nearly exhausting the available supply. That suggests an attack on Pickaxe Mountain would be at least as complicated and perhaps more so. Before Midnight Hammer, the Israeli Air Force cleared a route for the American bombers by destroying Iranian air defenses on the way to Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. Even then, the United States deployed an escort force of 125 aircraft, including F-22 stealth fighters, electronic warfare aircraft, and other platforms protecting the B-2s. So there's the 7 B-2s plus 125 other aircraft that were all in this mission together. A strike on Pickaxe Mountain would likely require, oh my gosh, why does it do this? A strike on Pickaxe Mountain would likely require the same capabilities, including Israeli assistance. For now, therefore, the main consideration for Israel and the United States remains one of cost versus benefit. This is one of these websites with lots of pop-ups constantly, so it's always shifting around on me. Okay, so you see how complicated a strike on, like we say, oh, yeah, how come they haven't hit Pickaxe yet? Oh, Trump's like, yeah, we're going to hit Pickaxe. Understand, we're talking about a massive, massive complicated operation. When you think about Midnight Hammer, like a massive operation here to destroy Pickaxe. And that's why it's not so simple to say, oh yeah, they should have just destroyed it in epic fury. Unless you know that it is absolutely the right timing and the right thing to do, you don't do it. Now he's going to go through a number of different conditions that need to be met in order to carry out such a mission. According to the Wall Street Journal, Pickaxe Mountain is not currently being used for active nuclear work. It served only as a storage site for centrifuges and other equipment that has not been installed or maintained in a way that would allow it to be used in the near future. To reproduce the effect achieved against Fordo last year, 4 basic conditions would need to be met. First, intelligence agencies would need evidence that Iran had moved its stockpile of uranium enriched to 60% into the facility and had installed and activated at least some centrifuges and other equipment, even on a trial basis. Think about it. And that's what Trump meant in that clip. That's why I said to you, I pointed that out when we watched the clip. When Trump says, we care about the material. Without the material, it doesn't matter. He's absolutely right. If it's just a bunch of broken centrifuges that are being stored there to be repaired or whatever, that's not a threat. There's no reason to do this massively complicated and expensive and risky operation where you really only get one shot at it. There's no point in doing that if the uranium is somewhere else and maybe there's some other centrifuges somewhere else. So unless it's actually somewhat operational, that they've moved the uranium there and installed and activated at least some centrifuges, there's no reason to hit it yet. Second, they would need sufficiently detailed intelligence on the precise location of the centrifuge production and operating halls to strike them accurately. And we're going to learn more about that in a moment. They have to know exactly where the centrifuges are and the other equipment is. You'll see. Third, the U.S. defense industry would need to replenish an adequate stock of GBU-57 heavy bunker-busting bombs. And the fourth condition is that the U.S. Air Force would need to complete the planning and logistical preparations for an operation at least as complex as Midnight Hammer. That would take time and cost a great deal of money, and that's probably already happening. So look at all these different factors that are at play here. Collecting intelligence on the facility is unlikely to be easy. To achieve meaningful damage, now here we go. This gets into how precisely they need to hit. What I just said before about how they have to know exactly where the centrifuges are. Look at this. To achieve meaningful damage, planners would need to know exactly where the centrifuges had been installed and calculate the bomb's impact points to within 1 or 2 meters. We're talking about, a meter is just under 3 feet. So we're like 5.5, 6 feet, perhaps even less. 1 or 2 meters. 1 meter is 3 feet. It's just over 3 feet. A meter is just over 3 feet. Right? So 1 to 2 meters is like just a couple feet, perhaps even less. They have to know exactly. It can't even be enough to know the general area in the mountain where the centrifuges are. They need to know exactly where they are. Why? The weapons would have to strike the same area in succession, penetrate the granite, and damage the centrifuge halls and underground installations rather than merely shake the mountain. In other words, this would be a one-time operation requiring precise timing. You see, the way that the centrifuges in Fordo were damaged in Midnight Hammer, they weren't hit directly. The impact was close enough to them that the damage, that the shaking, the tremors rendered them inoperable. But you have to be very close because of this igneous granite rock. They have to be close enough within a meter or two to make sure that they damage the centrifuges enough. Meaning if it's even 10 feet away where your bunker buster hits and the centrifuge is 10 feet away, it's not going to be rendered inoperable. It would need to take place just before Iran began producing weapons-grade fissile material, but not so early that the strike failed to cause a meaningful delay in the nuclear program, right? Because if the fissile material, if the uranium is not in there, and you strike and you didn't, and the 60% uranium is not damaged or somewhere else, then you've wasted it. Israeli and American intelligence and military officials had preferred to keep those calculations secret. Several days ago, however, Trump said during an interview on a popular podcast that the United States was indeed planning to attack Pickaxe Mountain. The Pickaxe was out of the bag and the secret was no longer secret. There's still no public evidence that Iran has installed the centrifuges stored in the mountain's tunnels for operation. Satellite images, however, show Iranian work around the tunnel entrances and elsewhere to reinforce and harden them allowing continued access even if the area is bombed. At the same time, those entrances would be difficult for ground forces to reach if the United States decided on an operation to destroy the facility's contents or potentially remove enriched uranium stored there. That's it. That's the piece. Okay. So now we understand why this, the answer to the question that he raised at the beginning of the article, why the US and Israel have not struck Pickaxe Mountain, it's starting to make more sense now, right? That, we can see why they haven't done it. Here's a little picture of Pickaxe Mountain. Okay, that's this piece. A lot of coughing today. Okay, now, the Iranian state media 2 days ago ran this on the front page of WANA as a cover story. Mount Kolang, that's Pickaxe Mountain, a second Fordo or Trump's exit from the war. And this is Iranian state media piece of analysis of this situation. 2 days before Donald Trump publicly mentioned Mount Kolang for the first time, the underground site had already become a recurring subject of Western media reports, satellite imagery, and security analyses. The sequence raises an important question. Is Washington preparing public opinion for a military strike, or is it already constructing the narrative of one? Now, notice what they're doing. Their framing of this is that the fact that it's being talked about by President Trump, and that even before he started talking about it, the media was talking about it. Remember, Trump even said in that interview, this, in that press conference, that press gaggle, when the reporter said, "Have the Iranians moved stuff?" And he says, "Well, we're just getting we're just seeing whatever we see from the fake news, right? We're just watching the media." The media has been talking about it. So the Iranians here are saying, why is Trump and the media talking about it? Even though they've been talking, the fact that they've been talking about it is what they want to analyze. The question matters because Trump's own remarks revealed a notable contradiction. He said Washington had no verified intelligence. He said that Washington had no verified intelligence indicating that Iran had transferred its centrifuges to Mount Kolang, yet in the same breath insisted that the facility would be struck soon and very hard. In military practice, publicly announcing the timing and target of an operation before it takes place is highly unusual, unless the objective extends beyond the operation itself. This is actually a smart thing. Not everything they say is false. There's some excellent analysis in this piece, but you see the direction they're headed. They say, it's one thing for there to be a military target. It's another thing for Trump to telegraph in advance that there's this military target. And if he's telegraphing in advance, then there must be some other objective of the operation here. Why is he, meaning they want to analyze, why is Trump telegraphing? Why is he talking about it? And remember, Trump said in that gaggle, it doesn't even, there's not a thing they can do about it. And usually I wouldn't say it in advance, but I'm saying it in advance. So they're trying to figure out what game is Trump playing by saying in advance that they're going to strike it. But also, like he also said, there's no verified intelligence. Like, think about the clip we just saw. And let's go over the clip again and think about what we read in Ram Ben Yishai's piece. Trump is asked, is there nuclear activity going on there, or is there material there? And he says, look, if it's just centrifuges and they don't have the uranium, then it's no big deal. And, and because where the action is, we want to hit it, which is what Ram Ben Yishai also said in that article, that you want to hit it when you get the maximum effect. So they're saying, wait a second, this is confusing. If you have no verified intelligence that there's centrifuges there, or that they're doing anything, you're just getting it from the media, why are you also saying we're going to attack that place very hard soon? So they're looking at it as a contradiction. It's Trump confusing them. At least 3 competing explanations have emerged to account for the sudden prominence of Mount Kolang. So now they're going to present 3 possible explanations for what's going on here. The first argues, but again, for the sudden prominence among, they want to say, why is everyone talking about it now? Why is Trump talking about it now? Three possible explanations. The first is that the United States is genuinely seeking to eliminate what it sees as at least one of the last critical components of Iran's nuclear program. In recent weeks, Western media have published satellite imagery and reports emphasizing the site's fortification, portraying it as one of the U.S. military's most significant potential targets. From this perspective, striking Mount Kolang would simply continue the strategy previously applied to other Iranian nuclear facilities. In other words, one possible explanation, very simple, we can put it in one sentence, is that this is just another target in the list of targets, and that's what it's about. It's a major target. It hasn't been hit yet, and that's why they're talking about it. But this doesn't fully answer the question, why is Trump revealing it? The second narrative, however, has I'm going to jump down to what I bolded here. The second narrative is the issue of that Trump might have some goal that is not a military goal. Does Trump need a military victory or a political one? In recent weeks, the U.S. president has repeatedly insisted that operations against Iran are not over, while also claiming that even if the United States withdrew from the region today, rebuilding Iran's capabilities would take 20 to 25 years. They're making it, again, sound like a contradiction. Like on the one hand, he says, oh yeah, we're just getting started. We're going to hit them harder. It's going to get worse for them. And then he also says, we could leave tomorrow and we basically won. Such rhetoric sounds less like a battlefield commander than of a president seeking to explain to the American public why the conflict continues and to ensure that if he eventually chooses to end it, he could present that decision as a success. Within that framework, Mount Kolang could serve the same purpose that certain symbolic operations have served in previous wars, a high-profile military action that creates the conditions for declaring mission accomplished, even if the underlying strategic balance has changed very little. This is fascinating. So they're saying a second possibility of why it's being talked about. So possibility number one is it's going to get struck, and it's going to get struck because it's just another target on the target list. It's part of the escalation. Possibility number two is it's going to get struck, but the reason that Trump is talking about it is that he's looking for an off-ramp, and he's looking for a way to bring the war to an official conclusion where he can declare victory. So if you spin up all of this chatter about Pickaxe Mountain, and the media starts talking about, Pickaxe Mountain, are they going to hit Pickaxe Mountain? And President Trump, have you decided to hit Pickaxe Mountain yet? And so if this buzz goes around and you build this narrative of how important it is, and then the United States goes in with this big dramatic event and strikes Pickaxe Mountain, then Trump can stand up at the mic the next morning and say, we've hit Pickaxe Mountain, we've destroyed their nuclear program, we're done, our work here is done, mission accomplished, and walk away. And what they're saying is that might be so, but even if the underlying strategic balance has changed very little, and they're right, the underlying strategic balance would kind of not change very much at all, because those guys would still be in charge of the regime. Who knows what other equipment and facilities they have? It won't change the strategic balance. Very interesting. That's the second possibility. A third scenario is even more complex. Over recent months, Western media have steadily elevated Mount Kolang's profile, and Trump has now translated that media narrative into political messaging. Such an intense focus may represent more than preparation for an attack. It could itself be part of a deception campaign. History offers many examples of military operations in which the true objective lay somewhere other than where public attention had been deliberately directed. For that reason, some analysts suggest that the emphasis on Mount Kolang could be intended to divert attention from other possibilities, including special operations, limited strikes elsewhere, or intelligence activities. This possibility cannot be confirmed or dismissed outright. One point, however, is clear. When the President of the United States publicly discusses a military operation before it occurs, he's no longer speaking only about a military target. He's also shaping how the operation will be perceived by domestic audiences, allies, and adversaries alike. In other words, by talking about it, Trump is already setting the predicate for whatever he's deciding to actually do. Fascinating. And they're right about that. And now Tehran's response. Ebrahim Rizai, a member of the Iranian Parliament's National Security Foreign Policy Commission, argued that a U.S. attack could provide compelling grounds for changing Iran's nuclear doctrine. Okay, this is code for, this is a threat. Because remember, the official doctrine is that the Ayatollah gave a fatwa that they're not supposed to create a nuclear weapon. Yeah, right. But now they're saying, well, we might actually change that if we're really so under attack. Other Iranian commentators have also raised the possibility of withdrawing from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty or increasing uranium enrichment. This is why the central question may not be whether the United States is capable of striking Mount Kolang. The more important question is whether Trump needs a military target or a political narrative that allows him to bring the war to a close. If the latter is true, then Mount Kolang may represent less a nuclear facility than the final card the White House hopes to place on the table before returning to diplomacy, a card whose true value lies not in the scale of destruction it produces, but in the story that can be told afterwards. And to close this out, let's watch my favorite clip of President Trump from over 10 years ago when he was first running for president, his very first foreign policy address, April of 2016.
And then there's ISIS. I have a simple message for them. Their days are numbered. I won't tell them where, and I won't tell them how. We must as a nation, be more unpredictable. We are totally predictable. We tell everything. We're sending troops, we tell them. We're sending something else, we have a news conference. We have to be unpredictable. And we have to be unpredictable starting now.
There you have it, folks. Unpredictability. That is the Trump doctrine. It is not, I've said this many times, the unpredictability, the misdirection plays, the mixed messaging. Oh, we don't really know what's there. We don't have any verification. Yeah, we're going to hit it pretty hard very soon. In the same 60-second clip, Trump is bamboozling his enemies. Look at that piece in Iranian state media where they're trying to analyze, why is Trump talking about this? Is it because of this? Is it because of this? Is it because of this? So they're trying to sound smart, like, well, there's a few different possibilities for why he's doing this. But what it really shows you is that he's completely bamboozled them. If we're confused about what Trump is going to do, remember, the enemy is also confused. So this is very interesting. Bottom line is this. An attack on Pickaxe Mountain is a very significant operation. And it has to be done at exactly the right timing for it to be worth doing. On the other hand, that analysis that the Iranians had, that second option, is very realistic. I could see that happening. Not that I'd be happy about it, where Trump might be ginning up all of this attention on Pickaxe Mountain, and then when he attacks Pickaxe Mountain, that's his off-ramp where he can declare the war a victory. I doubt that that's what's happening, but it's very interesting. It could happen. It could be that way. We don't know. Anyway, that's all I think you need to know and more about Pickaxe Mountain. I know this video went a little long, but I hope it was worth it. Please drop a comment. Let me know what you thought, and I'll see you in the next one.